So we'll come to custom threat prevention. So when we come to custom threat prevention, as you can see, you have the normal setup. That is the normal threat prevention. Now, for the normal threat prevention, you would have to check all of these. Okay, so you check your antivirus, you check your antibots, you check IPS, you check threat extraction and threat emulation. And when you're done with that, then you come to security policies. And then when you come to security policies, you would come down to where you have your normal threat prevention, just like we've been doing in the past. But for this infinity threat prevention, everything is kind of, should I say, you're following a template per se. Yes, it's an automated using a template. So to configure this, would click on threat prevention, would select autonomous threat prevention. Okay, now when you select autonomous threat prevention, you can see some of the security features here. Okay, so your sandbox actually it is the same thing. If you come to custom threat prevention, if you remember, for your threat emulation, when users are trying to download documents, those documents are going to be inspected in a sandbox environment. Okay, so they are going to be analyzed, they are going to be checked for all forms of threats, and if those documents are safe, then users will be permitted to download the documents. But if the documents are malicious, then they would not be permitted to download that document. So the keyword for your threat emulation is the fact that you have a sandbox environment. Okay, so analyzation or, analysis is actually done in in a sandbox environment. Okay, so let's come to the autonomous threat prevention. So if you come to the autonomous threat prevention, you can see the sandbox. Okay, so the sandbox actually refers to your threat emulation. Okay, let's go back to custom threat prevention. Now, for custom threat prevention, we have the anti-bots. Now, if you remember, we said that anti-bots refers to you trying to prevent communication between an infected system and a remote command and control server. Okay, so if you remember, we said that users can probably go to their houses because of BYOD, bring your own device. Users can go to their houses and connect to their personal network. Unintentionally, they could get infected by malware, and then the next day they will bring their infected system to the office, and then the infected system would might or rather might infect other systems in the network. Okay, which is why you need to prevent lateral movements of traffic. Like you need to monitor, inspect the lateral east-west movements. Okay, but that's by the way. Okay, so the user comes with this infected system, and then the system would make attempts to communicate with a remote command and control server. So there is a threat actor or a hacker who is at that remote command and control server. So when the laptop tries to communicate with that remote command and control server, your checkpoint firewall, because of the anti-bot blade, it would block that communication. So that is what your anti-bot does. Okay, so let's come to autonomous threat prevention, which is also known as the infinity threat prevention. So when we come to autonomous threat prevention, we can see C and C protection. So C and C protection, this C and C there refers to command and control. Okay, so C and C protection is the same thing as your anti-bots. Okay, let's take this one more time. Okay, so you have your normal IPS protection. Remember that IPS protection is used to protect the organization from network-based attacks. Okay, so let's say you're trying to protect laptops, you're trying to protect servers, you're trying to protect even Internet of Things devices. You can actually use your IPS. So coming back to our infinity threat prevention or autonomous threat prevention, we can actually see that there is the IPS protections. Okay, let's go back to custom threat prevention. Now, for your custom threat prevention, you have your threat extraction. Now, if you remember, we said that for threat extraction, that is when we're trying to configure our normal threat prevention. Okay, we said that for threat extraction, when users are trying to download documents, say maybe they're trying to download a Microsoft Word document, that checkpoint assumes automatically that that document is infected. Okay, so checkpoint by default there's a zero trust. So checkpoint assumes the document is malicious by default, and then checkpoint removes all the active elements from that document. So checkpoint is going to remove things like your macros, checkpoint to remove things like JavaScript, checkpoint to remove things like hyperlinks. So checkpoint is going to reconstruct the document, or let's use a keyword here. Checkpoint is going to sanitize that document. So users are going to be given a sanitized version of the document. That sanitized version does not have the links that is the hyperlinks, the JavaScript, the macros, and other embedded actionable elements. Okay, so let's come to the autonomous threat prevention. So when you come to autonomous threat prevention, you would see sanitization. So this sanitization is actually the same thing as your threat extraction. Okay, so the difference basically between the normal threat prevention we've been doing and this new autonomous threat prevention is just the, should I say, the semantics, like, or rather the semantics change. That is a change in just the wordings per se. Okay, so the wordings might be different, but the meanings are the same. Okay, so having known this, so we can select our normal autonomous threat prevention. You can see the different options that we have, and then we'll click on OK. So having done this, we are going to come back to security policies. Now observe something. The very moment we selected that particular autonomous threat prevention, all these blades were selected. If you remember, we said it's the same thing. Your threat extraction is now called sanitization. Your threat emulation is now called sandbox, so it's the same thing. Do not be scared. Okay, so we'll click on security policies. To do this configuration, we'll click on security policies, and after clicking on security policies, then the very next thing that we'll do would be to come down to threat prevention. So as you can see, for threat prevention, now instead of going for the normal custom policy as we have been doing in the past, where we'll have to change the actions, we'll select strict optimized, we'll select the, like, we'll configure the profiles, then we'll select those profiles in a policy, in a threat prevention policy. So instead of going through that route, what we are going to do this time around will be to click on Infinity Threat Prevention. Okay, so when you click on Infinity Threat Prevention, you are going to see some profiles that you can select. Now, this is how it's being done. You select the profile and then you apply that profile to a policy. So you configure profiles first, and then when you're done with the profiling, then you apply that profile in a policy. Okay, so we have multiple profiles here depending on what your goal is. Okay, there's actually the default profile that is called recommended for perimeter. Now, what this recommended for perimeter does is that firstly, it gives you, just like we earlier said in the beginning of this particular module, that this recommended for perimeter gives you a perimeter approach to network security. If you remember, we said that there are three types of approaches to network security. You can have the perimeter approach where you have a firewall protecting the network. You can have an endpoint slash layered security. So you can have like a layered security approach where you have, in addition to perimeter firewalls, you also have endpoint security solutions protecting your servers and your laptops. Okay, this is going to be shown in our next course, which is the Checkpoint Certified Endpoint Specialist course. Okay, so you can have the layered security approach, or you can have an hybrid security approach. Okay, so for your hybrid, you're combining both perimeter and layered. Okay, so let's say we want the perimeter security. So for this perimeter security, you can use it to protect your, like users that are browsing the web, data centers, incoming emails, file transfer, and many more. Okay, so if you select the normal recommended for perimeter, you're going to gain access to all the below listed blades. So you have Sandbox, you have Threat Cloud, you have CNC Protection, you have IPS, File and URL Reputation, and you also have Sanitization. Remember, these are just some change of words, okay? So Sandbox is the same thing as your threat emulation, Sanitization is the same thing as your threat extraction, CNC protection is the same thing as your anti-bots. You have your IPS, you have file and URL protection. Okay, so when users, just like your antivirus, so when users are trying to, maybe access the internet, such websites, the URLs are going to be checked, on Threat Cloud, and then if they have bad reputations, then users will be denied access to such websites. Okay, then you have your Threat Cloud. If you remember, we said that your Threat Cloud is actually like a global threat intelligence platform. Okay, it contains like a worldwide network of threat sensors. Okay, so that is the first option that you can go for. If you do not want recommended for perimeter, there are actually other options. Okay, you can go for the data center east west. So if your goal is to, prevent lateral movements, or not prevent, rather the keyword there should be protect. So if your goal is to protect or to inspect, lateral movement of data, so you're trying to inspect data that is flowing from east to west, not we don't mean north south now, because north south means, okay, everybody, they are trying to access the internet. Okay, just you can try to envisage, your, just like your map, the north and the south. So the internet is at the north, which is up, then your laptops and servers are down. Okay, so laptop servers are trying to access the internet, so that is your north south normal type of traffic. But in this case now, servers within the same network, okay, just like a data center. Okay, so you have servers, you have routers, you have switches, you have some laptops too. Okay, so these devices are trying to communicate with themselves. Now what if a particular device is infected? Okay, your firewall by default monitors north south traffic, okay, traffic that flows from systems to the internet. But now what if a user takes his laptop home, gets infected unintentionally, comes back to the office or to the data center, plugs in his laptop, and then the laptop then begins to laterally infect other computers or other servers and everything. So if you want to protect or to mitigate or to prevent that kind of scenario, then you can go for the data center east west profile, if that is your goal. Okay, if you want to protect, say, internal network, for example, let's say you want to, prevent cyber attacks over internal traffic between internal users and internal servers. You can go for this particular profile. If you also want to go for the strictest security, like you want very strict security, you want maximum security for perimeter gateways and everything, then you can go for this option that says maximum, or rather strict security. Then there's also the guest network. So you let's say you want to protect, you know, Wi-Fi, like those who are connecting to your Wi-Fi. You want to ensure that there are no threats through that medium. Then you can select the guest network. And then finally, if you actually do not know the like okay, because all these options are enticing, and you're not so sure of the best one to go for, then there's an option that says help me decide. So if you click on help me decide, what it does is that it compares, so it is going to compare all the profiles that you have. So it is going to show you what is permitted and what is not permitted. For example, if you're going for the option that says recommended for perimeter, well, you're going to see that HTTPS is actually protected. So there are protections, or rather there are file scannings for HTTP, there are file scannings for your SMTPS. There are also protections for for your FTP, but then you don't have for the CIFS. Okay, so if you want all these options, then you can go for strict security. If you go for a guest network, as you can see, the only protection there is just for your HTTP and HTTPS um, protocol. Okay, so the scanning is going to be done on only HTTP and HTTPS. If you go for internal network, every other protocol will be scanned apart from your SMTP. That is, apart from your simple mail transfer protocol. If you go for, okay, so the same thing actually applies to your data center east-west. Okay, so your data center east-west and your internal network profile, they are similar. If you observe, they are actually similar. So the only difference there basically, they are the same thing basically, but the difference is that your data center kind of protects, inspects communication between servers, and then when you come to internal network, it offers protection, or rather it inspects traffic between internal users and internal servers. So that's just the difference. For data center, it's between servers. For internal network, it's between internal users and internal servers. Okay, so based on what we've seen so far, based on what we've seen, that the strictest, or rather that going for strict profile actually gives us all the security features that we need. In this case, what we're going to do therefore would be to select this option. So we're going to go for strict security. Now, if you remember, we said that after setting the profile, when you're done with the profile, then you apply it in a policy. Okay, so the good news is we've selected the profile, and automatically this has also been selected in the policy. Okay, let's say you want to protect some files per se. Okay, you have the option to go for file protections. Okay, so you can say okay that you want to inspect all Word documents, you want to inspect PowerPoint, you want to inspect Excel documents, and various forms of file extensions. Okay, for example, let's say users are trying to download Word documents. Now, those Word documents are going to be inspected. Remember, they're going to be inspected in a sandbox environment. And then, in addition to being inspected, they are going to be cleaned. Okay, let's go back to the earlier keyword we used. If you remember, we said that one of the keywords for threat extraction is the word sanitized. So sanitization is synonymous with cleaning. Okay, so if users, based on what we've selected, if users are trying to download Word documents, those Word documents are going to be inspected in a sandbox environment. Now, while the inspection is going on, because this inspection can take up to about, say, maybe 3 minutes. And then some users do not have the patience to wait for 3 minutes. So you can actually configure both the threat emulation that does the inspection and the threat extraction that does the sanitization, because sanitization takes place in just 10 seconds. Okay, so the documents are reconstructed, JavaScript will be removed, macros will be removed, hyperlinks will be removed, all within 10 seconds. Okay, so a user is trying to download a particular document. Checkpoint, because of the sanitization, Checkpoint assumes that that document is infected. Checkpoint removes all the active elements and then gives the user a stripped down version of that document within 10 seconds. Okay, so the user can be using that document temporarily while the main inspection is going on. Remember that inspection based on the size can take up to 3 minutes. Now, after the inspection is done, if Checkpoint discovers that, oh, that file is clean, that is, the file is safe, Checkpoint allows the user to gain access to the original document. But if Checkpoint discovers that the document is malicious, that is, it is unsafe, it contains malware, viruses, and many more, trojans, and everything, then Checkpoint deletes the original version of the document. So Checkpoint is going to delete it instantly. Okay, so if that is what you want, then you select the action that says inspect, and clean. Okay, now if you observe over here, you'll see that there are some file extensions that have just inspect. For example, a user is trying to download an archive file. The action that is selected by default is inspect. Okay, but let's say you are not comfortable with that. You actually have the capacity. Okay, so you can actually change this from from inspect to inspect and clean. So you can actually select what you want. You click on add override. So for example, you can select, okay, so let's say we want archive files. Okay, so as you can see, .zip is an archive file. Okay, by default the action is inspect. Even sandbox is turned off, so we can say, okay, let's turn on sandbox. Okay, so this is going to be inspected, not just the normal HTTPS inspection, because your HTTPS inspection is used to inspect your encrypted traffic. Okay, if you remember, HTTPS stands for your Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, and then information being sent using the HTTPS protocol is actually encrypted. So for your HTTPS inspection, Checkpoint is going to decrypt that encrypted traffic, inspect it, and then permit the traffic. So it goes for inbound and outbound traffic. Okay, but let's say you want something deeper than that. Okay, so you want this inspection to be done in a sandbox environment. So you can actually select sandbox, and then for the action you can change the action from inspect. If you want to bypass, let's say maybe for example, because of the HIPAA rules, let's say you want to bypass the inspection of medical records, you can select bypass. Or you can choose to block. You can say, okay, fine, you don't want archive files in your network. So if there's a .zip file, if there's any archive compressed file, you can say, okay, fine, block such file. And then when users are trying to download such documents, whether it's, so it doesn't matter whether it is east-west, traffic. It doesn't matter whether it is the internal profile that you've selected. It doesn't matter whether it is the strict profile or the normal or whether it is the default perimeter security that you've selected. Now it doesn't really matter. Okay, so for strict security, okay, because we are configuring strict security, so you can change this to block. So you can block such, or you can go for inspect and clean. Okay, so let's say, okay, fine, we want to, inspect and clean these documents. So we can actually select inspect and clean. Now, when we are done with everything, then we can come to, so we can actually install